Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It is 4 o'clock here in Los Angeles. Let's go ahead and get started with our lesson for today, which is geometry. Geometry is, I'll say, a lesson that is important in so much as that it will be on the test. Yes, today I'm not wearing my glasses, so at this point, I suppose I will be squinting quite often at the camera if I have to read something on the screen. That said, the one thing that I want to make sure you understand is that today's lesson is important, but nowhere as important as anything else we've done prior to this lesson. And I want to be clear on that. That is, there we go, Molly, join the club. But you have no excuse. You're at home. Exactly. I've always been scared to get contacts. I've never had contacts in my life. But yes, glasses, no. So today we're going go big or go home. But here's what I do want to say in seriousness, though. Geometry will be on the test. They say about 10 to 15%. But the one thing that I will say to you is that it is nowhere as important as arithmetic or algebra, folks. And so if you think, oh, we spent 3 hours here today, but we didn't spend 3 hours, we spent 3 hours back then, so they're about equivalent in terms of importance, you are dead wrong. In my opinion, weeks 1 through 4, non-negotiable. Weeks 5 and 6, negotiable. Meaning, if you don't want to do week 5 and 6 of this course, that's okay. You'll still do decently on this test. Not great, you'll do decently. And that's because you don't see a whole lot of geometry. You don't see a whole lot of stats, combinatorics, or probability. You don't see a whole lot of advanced verbal unless you're doing already great. So in some sense, if you want to mail in weeks 5 and 6, that's okay by me. Do not mail in weeks 1 through 4. However, if you are sincere about wanting to get a 7-something on this test, then of course weeks 5 and 6 are absolutely critical to achieving that. So I just want to make sure we understand that. Now, the lesson itself is going to be laid out similar to the skill builder by shape. But if you came to class today, just wanted to, I suppose, soak in some content knowledge and learn how to calculate the area of a triangle, you will be bitterly disappointed. Meaning, yeah, we'll talk about it, but then you won't have the results on the test to show what all that studying time was put to use for. You want to go past that so quickly, it's not even funny. So the game plan is pretty straightforward. We'll start off with some quick geo strategy, then we'll get into the world of the triangles, easily the most important shape. We'll spend the first hour talking triangles. An hour or two, we'll come back with some quadrilaterals and some circles. And then we'll finish out the day with some coordinate geo as well as the 3D shapes. So with that then, let's go ahead and get this started. Obviously on pages 58 and 59 of your guys' books, you will find a nice little place for all the formulas to be captured. I'll say all in quotes. I don't think they're all there, but a good number of what you are going to be seeing on test day is boom right there. So dog-ear them today if need be, so you can kind of come back to it as necessary, but you got to put those on flashcards, folks, and then and make sure you have them memorized. You don't want to get questions wrong on test day just because you don't remember. Lowest level of the pyramid, inexcusable. This question right here, I think, is a good illustration of what many a geo question will look like for you. Got a diagram. If you don't have a diagram, draw one out is my advice. Even if you have a diagram, I would strongly recommend, if you're going to be manipulating it, to draw it down onto your paper. Again, dumb it down by drawing it down is kind of a way to look at it. You'll see that it's a problem involving a lot of words. A lot of geometry questions are straight up word problems, in that there are problems involving words. So all the stuff we talked about in week 3, word problems, right, which you read as you read, which really requires a whole lot of week 2 algebra skills in terms of kind of the translation and execution, which requires, of course, a week 1 arithmetic fundamentals. They start to really come home here today in a big way. So even today, as you go through this lesson, start to ask yourself where you're having tough times finishing things out. Are you having a tough time getting it started, getting the equations on paper? Then that might mean you suck at the geo, or that might mean you suck at the word problem translation of it. Or are you having a tough time executing, which means maybe you suck at the algebra or you suck at the arithmetic. It's so important to diagnose correctly. Remember, in a week from now, Mike definitely drops. Then you're off on your own trying to figure out how to get to the scores that you want. And at that point, if you're not accurately diagnosing what you're having a tough time with, you're going to be studying a whole lot but not having anything to show for it. Avoid that critical mistake. So with that, I want to kind of take a crack at this question to start. And I want you to see how, I suppose, easy these questions can be if, again, you just have a disciplined approach to it. This is a classic question where if you read it more than one time, it's a fail. So if you find yourself continually rereading in practice tests and homework, you're not doing it right. It says x, y, and z are angles created by the two straight lines that intersect the center of the circle above. Right there, they've given us a number of equations, and if I've crushed the Skill Builder, specifically the lines and angles section, I'm able to remember that angles on a straight line add up to 180 degrees. And thus, I can say y plus z equals 180. Same time, I can say y plus x equals 180. And just from eyeballing those two equations, I should recognize that everything there is the same, with the exception of the z and the x. And thus the z and the x are interchangeable. And of course, if you know the vertical angle setup, then you realize that as well. But that's the derivation for it. I'm done with sentence number 1. Now I'm ready to move on. So sentence number 2. If y minus x equals 100. Okay. Stop at the comma, stop at the period, translate. Not allowed to translate. Keep going. What? Remember, you see those question words, you got to slow down. What portion, I use variables that mean something, portion P of typically means multiply the total circumference of the circle, so that's just a 2 pi r from pages 58, 59, is made up by, classic verbs tend to be equal signs, and the arc of angle Z. Now arc length, you also learn in the Skill Builder, is all about the central angle divided by the 360, multiplying it by the circumference of the circle. So if I'm trying to solve for P, really what I'm trying to solve for is Z. Divide that by 360. So what you have in front of you now is no longer a 4-lined, diagrammed question. You now just have a 4 equal signed question, which just requires you to solve for that expression z over 360. And this is the way so much of what we do here today is going to start to look like. So again, I start pushing you guys to start to be able to add stuff, subtract stuff, doing the mental math. You can see here x is dropping at 2y equals 280, y equals 140, pop that there, z 40, 40 over 360 gets you to your 1/9. I will never fault someone for translating as they go using equal signs as part of the setup, but in terms of that execution, just remember equal signs are expensive signs, folks. You don't really want to waste them. All right, with that then, let's go ahead and get started with the world of triangles. You know, triangles, like I said, are the most important shape. We'll spend the first hour talking triangles, but the reality is we'll spend the whole day talking triangles. I think a good general rule of thumb is if you get stuck, probably a triangle is going to bail you out, and so it's not a bad thing to look for in a jam. Obviously, you have the special triangles. I would make sure you understand that you don't want to be doing Pythagorean on this test, in my opinion. If you're doing the Pythagorean theorem, you've probably missed out on some sort of common right triangle that you should have seen. These are obviously some of the common ones. Pay close attention to the ones with the angles, the 45, 45, 90, or the 30, 60, 90. Those right triangles pop up frequently enough because it gives the test maker an opportunity to test your knowledge on angles, test your knowledge on essentially Pythagorean, ratios, everything, if you will. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right, with that then, I want to go ahead and get taking a start at one of these questions here, and we'll start with some basic stuff and start to move our way upward pretty quickly in terms of difficulty. This first one I think is a good question. It's a good question because it's one of those classic drywall v door questions, in my opinion. You can go through the drywall on this, or you can go through the door. And if you go through the drywall on this question, or at least the setup of it, you might think you're on the right path. But let me say this right now. This is an incredibly easy question. In that, it doesn't require a lot of effort. You can put forth a lot of effort and get to the same right answer. But what I want you to remember is that this is a test that rewards you for, I don't want to say style over substance, because substance is important, but for style. And thus, I would say to you, this question, at most, needs 2 equal signs from setup through execution. The classic drywall approach on this needs 2 equal signs just to set this thing up. And if you set it up that way, my guess is you need at least another half a dozen equal signs to execute. So hell no, is that the way we're going to go on this? But what I like about this question is what I like about so many a quant question in here is that you don't really need to know how to do this question, and you could still end up with some decent odds of getting it right. Meaning, if you just have some basic triangle knowledge, you should be able to get this down to 50-50 within relative seconds. And so to me, if you can't get there, that's the bigger issue. Like, I don't even care if you can't get this question right. But if you get it wrong in one of those more embarrassing ways, that's the bigger problem. So this is not a lesson where I just have to check the box and do the skill builder or skip the skill builder. This is one of those lessons where I got to crush it, because it's very hard to start to kind of reason out what the area of a trapezoid is if I don't even understand anything else about this damn subject. So with that then, let's go ahead and try to do this right. Let's put a minute and a half on the clock. Let's get this started. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. Most of you guys are crushing this question, which is good, as you should. Again, not a tough question at all. But it is one where not everybody is in, I would say, those answer choices where you should be, even if you don't know what you're up to. So obviously this thing says PQ is 3, PS is 4, PR, which is this segment right here, is what? So at that point, I can understand if you want to look at this and try to figure this out. Obviously, from a Pythagorean theorem perspective, this is a 3, this is a 4, this is obviously a 5. But then what? Well, if we want to make this x, we could make this a y. And then we could say, well, x squared plus y squared equals 4 squared. That is the hypotenuse after all. We could also then do x here, x squared plus, this would force this to be a 5 minus y. So 5 minus y squared equals a 3 squared. And we would have two equations, two variables at that point, and we could solve. But remember what I said at the beginning of this question, all you need is two equal signs from setup through execution to finish. I'm using 2 right now just to set it up, and given that they're quadratic equations, I ain't even doing these in my head because they're quadratic with 2 variables, so F my life. So, question for you. As you look at this, you should have a good sense that you can eliminate all these answer choices except 2 answer choices without even doing any more math. Just kind of looking and thinking about what it is that even as I was just talking about it. What should be the only 2 answer choices on the board here, folks, as you look at this? And you say, man, if I were lucky, only one of these would have been here to begin with. So, here's, a lot of you guys are saying B and C, and I think I get it. Because you see the 5s in the mix. Tom, why are you saying A and B here, and Jonathan and Nathan? Because I would tend to agree with you guys. I would say I do believe this is an A-B world almost immediately. Because you don't, again, have to do a whole lot of work. It comes back to almost the way that I broke this down. You might be getting, I don't want to say quasi-lucky with the BC tip here, but I want to be clear that we see this the way these other fellows do. And you're absolutely right, Tom. You're saying, look, man, even when you just went through this, you made this a leg of a right triangle, either with a 4 as a hypotenuse or a 3 as a hypotenuse. You know legs are always going to be smaller than a hypotenuse in a triangle. That's the definition of a hypotenuse, the longest segment. And so right now, even if I don't do anything, I could just put my head down, pray to the almighty GMAT God and say, give me one answer that's less than 3, and I'm done with this question. So it's like, thank you, thank you, thank you, kind of damn you. And as a result, I do strongly believe that even if you don't know what to do to finish this out, you could have and should have gotten here. But now to kind of finish this out, well, I don't really know what to do. Well, here's a piece of advice that I would strongly give you if you get stuck in geometry. It's to ask one question. Why? Why are you giving me this information, test maker? How does that relate back to the information I already know from having crushed the skill builder? You know, pages 58, 59 as a summary of it all. With that in my mind, I may not have known what to do with the question, but at least it might start to kind of kick some things around up top that then helps me figure out which way to go. So like on this example, clearly they tell me this is a right angle. So I can figure out pretty easily that whole side. Now they tell me that this is a right angle. Obviously because I could do the whole 2 equation, 2 variable setup. But that seems very drywallian at this point. So what's another reason that they may be telling me that this is a right angle here, that this line, of course, when it hits that side, becomes perpendicular? What do I know from the skill builder that may be of value for me to think about? Yeah, I think that's absolutely right here, Molly and Katrina. You look at something like this and you say, man, heights are defined by definition as a line that's perpendicular to a side from an opposite angle. Awesome, Jonathan and Angela. So if I turn this over to a side here, and I say, hey, let's put P up top, Q over here, put an R in the mix, put an S there, then it becomes pretty clear that that becomes a height. And thus, it's like, well, what do I know height in terms of applicability on this test? It's like, well, obviously area. And so what I want you to learn is the second most important formula that is not in your skill builder. And it is a really simple one, and one that I'm okay with you using one equal sign for. And it's that A is equal to A. Meaning, the area of a triangle is always going to equal the area of the triangle. That's a kind of a stupid formula of sorts, but I think it's actually a very powerful one. Because it kind of piggybacks a little bit off what Megan's saying there, which is like, look, man, any one of these triangles, you can calculate an area with 3 different bases every single time. What you think is a base may not be my base, I might use a different base, but we still got to get to the same ending number because it's the same damn shape. And so what that tells me is that at times, if I got to try to figure out some missing dimensions in a triangle, and I'm given some of those dimensions, then maybe this is a viable way to start the process. I didn't realize that at first. Hell, I didn't even tackle it that way right now. But I'm seeing it done. That just tells me I got to write me a nice takeaway that gives me the trigger I should have seen, the approach that I should have taken, so that I don't kind of either struggle with these types of questions in the future, or I just get it done even quicker. And thus, when I look at it that way, I just say, all right, so basically you're telling me it's just 1/2 3 times 4 is equal to 1/2 5 times, and we'll call that an H now. It's like, yeah, basically. You know the halves cancel. 5s come over here. You're at 12/5 in terms of the math. So 2 equal signs to finish this out. From start to finish. So really more like 1 equal sign if you wanted to. So what do you start to see about a question like this? What's it testing you on? Area. Do you know how to solve for the area of a triangle? That's really what it's asking you about. Everybody in here, my hope, knows that area is equal to 1/2 base times height. But if everyone knows it, then how are they going to give you a question on it? Well, they got to try to see if you have a deeper understanding of it, like so much of what we see in here. So just make sure you start to realize that. All right, I think this data sufficiency question is, I'll call it a phenomenal data sufficiency question. It's a phenomenal one because it is so damn easy. My hope is we get 100 on this question. But we only get 100 on this question if we say, man, I'm so glad this question is coming after week 4 data sufficiency because I learned so much last week that really makes this question super easy. If that's not what happens, and instead you just approach this as if you never sat through week 4, then I can see why this question could be challenging. But you learn so much, whether it be in the constructs, whether it be in the reward system, to avoid so much of the carnage that typically accompanies this question. So let's do this right. Let's bring some respect. Let's put 1:30 on the clock. Let's knock this out. right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. Not gonna lie, we have some atrocious answers in the poll right now, but that ain't even gonna be me telling you. That's gonna be this, essentially, reward system doing the dirty work. Notice there's no diagram. If I were you, I would draw a diagram. Again, dumb it down, draw it down. In an isosceles triangle, DEF, that's a D, that's an E, that's an F, that's an ISO. Again, it doesn't matter where you put the D. Just make sure you're able to connect the dots from D to E to F. Wants to know what the measure is of angle EDF, so then you go in that order. So they want to know just basically what's angle D. Statement 1 says E is 96. Statement 2 says F is 42. Question for you. What is the one answer today that if someone picked it, you should tell them, drop the course, drop your GMAT, drop your MBA admissions goals. Business school is not even remotely in your cards. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad we see that. I'm glad we all see this. Why? Please tell me if you're in choice E, it's because you got the fattest finger in the world and you need to do something about it, because there is no way anybody can be picking choice E right now unless you just didn't even do the skill builder. In which case, then why are you here wasting your time? That's to start. Now, here's the good news. Most of you, I think it looks like probably like 97% of you eliminated this for the crap that it is, which is great. But here's what kills me. What one answer is only slightly better than this, and there are people there that are making me sad, because you can't be laughing at this guy when you're only slightly better than him. Yeah, very, very nice. So, damn, we're really dialed in today. This gives me hope. I'm not gonna lie, I was really very nervous about coming to class today after that shit show that was advanced verbal last lesson. So this is straight up a drop the course answer. That's like undisputed. This to me, I don't even want to call it a low level trap, but I'll humor anybody in choice C right now and call it a low level trap. But it really is a crap answer, because think about what you're doing. Your only competition, like, first of all, you're like, oh yeah, if I got two angles, I can figure out a third. Why the F would I give you a minute and a half to do that? Like, think about that for a second. Where's the respect? And again, the only guy you're laughing at is the idiot who should be dropping the course and even be taking the GMAT, has no shot at getting into a good business school. Like, that's who you're laughing at? Like, that's not who you want to be laughing at. Like, if you're a 99er, you want to be just laughing at the guys who are going to get 700s, guys. Like, to me, that's who you want to be laughing at, not at this guy. So if you're in choice C, that's a fail. Question. MFA, here I come. I don't know, man. Yeah, even that you didn't pick E and you didn't pick C, but in this particular case, I think the sentiment is probably correct, Nathan. So here's a question for you. What is the high-level trap answer? The trap answer where someone will show that they did some work, but you know, they get a little bit sloppy in sticking the landing. And this is the #1 wrong answer in the poll, which I could live with. But, you know, we're better than that. Very nice, guys. So let me say this to start. You guys are dialed in nicely. And my hope is, even if you flirted with some of these answers, the frickin' reward system kind of just helps you get to where you need to be. And so yeah, absolutely D is the classic high-level trap. Why is that? Well, obviously statement #1 is sufficient. Because if you know one angle is 96 and you know it's an iso triangle, no other angle is going to match, so the other two must be the ones that match. End of story. Move on. A versus D immediately. But the problem here is that some of us don't have that kind of discipline. Instead, we have sort of this pathological disorder that requires us to actually solve it. We need that certainty. We need to know what angle D is. And thus, we can't just let it go. We got to say, all right, well, if E is 96, 180 minus a 96 gets me to an 84. Then I got to divide by 2, gets me to a 42. So angle D is 42, angle F is 42. Okay, got it. Sufficient, A or D. Not a good way to do it, but I can live with it, as long as you then approach the second statement pretty correctly. So remember what we talked about last week? It was on, granted, a different geometry question, but it was in that, under that section at the end with a construct that says, hey, look, man, when the statement is so painfully obviously sufficient, and again, it looks like it's like 90% of us, or something higher than that even, saw that statement 1 was sufficient, then all you got to do is bring some serious respect for the second statement. Otherwise, if it's just as easy, like what the F? You're looking at a 200 level question? Hell no. And so the idea there is like, okay, well, I know that it's easy to say, well, I just figured out F is 42, so clearly I just did, it's the same information, but stop. Consider the possibility that maybe you overplayed your hand here. You know, at this point, look down a level and see if you may have overlooked a situation. Play that devil's advocate. And so now it's like, well, could I have a scenario where D might not be 42? That's all you're thinking about. Because you know you could have a scenario where it is. Now you just got to think, could I have a scenario where it's not? And it's like, well, of course you can. What's to stop me from just saying D is 96 in statement number 2? Remember, that does not contradict statement number 1. It gives you a scenario which overlaps statement number 1. So, hey, yeah, I found a scenario where it's no longer 42. Hell no, is it sufficient? Choice A, final answer. And so here, you know, even though I'm saying E is drop the course, the reward system here might not say that. Because after all, I think the drop the course starts to emerge when you're off by 3 levels. Like E right now is only off by 2 levels, so it's like, even if it looked up, it still would be screwed. But again, that's where you start to accept responsibility for your ill preparation. If you're in choice C right now, I do not want you to feel like you're in the same level as anybody picking choice D right now. Because arguably this reward system might lead you to believe that. This reward system might lead you to believe like, hey, you're in the same boat. You guys are both off by 1 level. I would say, hell no. D at least is respectable here. C is not. Again, understand that, own it, and do something about it. All right, nice job on this question, guys. I really like it. Let's take a look at this next question. I think it's a more difficult question. Obviously, the first ones are, I'd say, layups of sorts. This one's a great question because it starts to test you on a number of different things. You want to make sure you're able to stick the landing, though. Again, start to bring some respect on these questions. They're not tough just yet, but they're not super easy either. You have the skills you need to crush them. Make use. Let's put 2 on the clock and then we'll talk. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. Pretty nice work in the polls. We had some sucker answer action in the mix. Thankfully now it's not there. Remember how this tends to operate here. I think even using that knowledge, some of us could have made some better moves here. Just even from a gambling perspective. It says if an equilateral triangle has an area of root 243, so write what you read as you read, area equals root 243, then what is the perimeter? If you translated it like this, I would say, okay, fine, give yourself a solid D+. Like, yeah, you translated it, but you didn't really add much of value. First of all, you know area is 1/2 base times height, but really it's an equilateral triangle, so you really know it's 1/2 S times height. Perimeter, you know, is 3 sides, so you know then you're looking for essentially 3S. But question for you, before I even go any further. If the question wants me to solve for 3S, what do you think some fool's going to do on this question? Again, polls arguably don't lie. Where they start to go and do work, but then they tap out a little bit too quickly. What kind of move do you think they start to make here? Yeah, exactly, Omar. They come back with just solving for S or 1S. Exactly, Natalie. And to me, that's the classic right answer to the wrong question. Awesome, Gabby. And so when you look at a word problem and they ask you for something, always ask yourself, is there some other answer that they might be able to do that would burn you? Yeah, solid, Felipe. You know, so when you look at this, if I had nothing else going for, again, I don't know how to do this question, I'm behind on the clock on time, I'll just gamble on this. And I know one of the most common mistakes that the test loves to exploit is a right answer to the wrong question. I'll say, shit, man, let me just find answers that have a tripling effect and just pick the bigger one. So when I look at these answers, I say, hey man, A and C, you look like you're off by 3. Leads me to believe that this might be the sucker and this might be the right. B doesn't have an answer that's 3 times it, so I'd say I ain't even touching B. C doesn't have an answer that's 3 times bigger, but it's already 3 times bigger than that, so I love it. D, of course, looks like it's got an answer E that's 3 times bigger, so I'd say you're probably the sucker, you're probably the right answer. So right now, as I look at this, I'd be guessing 50-50 between C and E. Does that mean C and E, one of those has to be right? Of course not. Remember, I'm gambling right now. And whenever I gamble, and if I lose, I don't go crying to the pit boss. I lost my money fair and square, so to speak. So, I should have known how to do this. But if I win, I'm not that surprised either. Because all I'm doing is taking account of what this test is about and learning how to essentially play by those same punishing rules. So now what I want to do is actually figure this out. So notice, of course, you know the sides. If you're trying to figure out the height there, then you got to drop an altitude in the mix. And if you put a 90 degree there, and this, of course, is 60, it forces that to now be a 30. And, of course, that means you're sitting with one of your classic, commonly occurring triangles, a 30, 60, 90, a 1 root 3, 2 setup. So now you just got to figure out the height dimension. Well, I know the side opposite the 90 is an S, so I'm looking for the side opposite the 60, which is an H. Now it doesn't matter which way you do it, left to right, top to bottom, or bottom to top, right to left. But in this case, you should be able to figure out pretty quickly that H is just root 3 over 2 times S. Or more importantly, the area of any equilateral triangle from here on out, forever and ever, will be S squared root 3 over 4. I'm popping that on a flashcard, never deriving it again. I don't need to. Why would I? This is now starting to reach top of the level pyramid stuff where you're creating new information off of old information that you already know. Because obviously this question is testing you on area, it's testing you on 30, 60, and 90, it's testing you on your ratio abilities. F that, I've just got this in the can. So now, if I had this in the can, this becomes a 30-second question. F the diagram, F the 2 lines. This is S squared root 3 over 4 equals root 243. Well, what's 3s? There's nothing else to it but just pure old algebra. And you don't even need another equal sign, arguably. You bring the 4 over root 3 here. Remember, you want to simplify things. Don't try breaking this down and then break that down. Why? Look, they see you see they're divisible. That gets to 81. Square root of 81 is a 9. S squared is 36. S is 6. 3 of those is 18. Shockingly, choice C turns out to be a decent answer. And so as you start to go through this, obviously you see people in a sucker answer D, so it means like, hey man, I can't even do the math, can't even stick the landing. You want no part of that. There were people that were flirting with A, which is good because they left it, and then of course, my hope is they ended up in C as a result. I want to take a look at this last question involving some similarity here. Similarity, remember, hopefully you did the skill builder online. I don't know if they talk too much about it in the books, but online they do. And the idea there is that, hey, when I've got triangles, multiple triangles, that share the same angles, then I can conclude that they are similar triangles, and thus their lengths are proportional. This question here starts to test that understanding. But be careful. It's not a tough question, but it does require some respect. Let's put 2 on the clock and then we'll talk. right, let's take a look at this question here. Pretty nice job on it. Notice what they tell you, that DE is parallel to AC. Remember, always ask why they're telling you something if you don't clearly know. All you need to think about is, what do I know about lines being parallel first? That's where you jog that skill builder, and it's like, oh yeah, if they're parallel and they're intersected by a third, then I know that it creates corresponding angles. So in this case, D and A are the same, E and C are the same. Then you move on. If AC is 10, DE is 5, the area of ABC is 40. So big boy is 40. Then what is the area of BDE? So what's this small one? Well, when you're talking about all these multiple triangles, I think it is useful then to actually break them down separately. Of course, I hope no one is sitting there and drawing and marking up their books. Can't do it on test day. You're giving yourself a distinct advantage now that you wouldn't have then. Now your job is to figure out, well, what's the area of this guy? Well, notice, you know that this angle was the same, you know this angle was the same. In theory, since 3 angles add up to 180 on a triangle, and if you know 2 turn out to be exactly the same, you don't need to ever figure out the third one. But here, it's not hard because they are the same exact one anyhow. So now we know they are similar. We know lengths are proportional. Question for you. If someone kind of got this far and they understood that things are proportional, what would be the classic sucker move someone would make that I suppose shows, again, such contempt for the process, such contempt for the test maker? What would they end up kind of moving on here? Yeah, abso-freaking-lutely. And that's it. It's very easy to do, right? Solid, guys. You look at this and you're like, oh yeah, man, this ain't hard. And it's like, what? I know it's not hard. But how is this a good move? It's a disrespectful one. Again, if you're crushing this test, then fine, I get it. These answers will come out of the sky so quickly to you. But then again, if you're crushing this test, you wouldn't be picking a move like this. So it's almost, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. At this point in your preparation process. So what should I do? Well, I could just start to figure things out. Meaning, if this is the base, you know the height over here is going to be what? An 8. If you know it's a 2-to-1 ratio, then you know this height will be a 4, and thus you could figure out that the area will just be a 10. That's not hard to do. That would be probably the C+ approach to getting it done. A classic textbook way to do it. At least it gets the job accomplished. A better way to do it would be a sort of algebraic way, where you start to recognize that, hey, this base is half this base is half that base, this height is half that height. So at some point, through a little bit of algebraic substitution, I could come to 10 pretty quickly as well. And that's the way the books do it. It's built off of this approach, which is a C approach. And I'd probably give that then a B in terms of the style points, so definitely check that out. So what would I say you should do instead of all this crap? Just memorize a very nice, easy shortcut. And this, by the way, is the A approach, but it's the A approach built off of the B approach that's in your books, which is built off of the C approach, which I've thrown up here on the slide. So what does this tell you? It says basically take, if you have similar triangles in the mix, the side of one of the triangles, the corresponding side to the other triangle, divide them, square them, and that's the proportion of the areas. So on this question, if I say the 5, the 10, that gives me the this corresponding size. 5 over 10 is 1/2. 1/2 squared is 1/4. So I know the area is 1 to 4. So if that's a 40, that gets me to a 10. And you're not dicking around anymore, even drawing anything out, let alone solving numerically for any piece. So that would be my advice. All right, with that then, I want to wrap up the world of triangles here. Nice start, folks. Just completely on top of things for the most part, which I love to see. Let's go ahead and get into quadrilaterals next. Good time to take our first break, though. I'll throw this up as a little bit of halftime entertainment, and then we'll take a look at some questions afterwards. So let's take 5. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into this next section here. Quadrilaterals, I think, are an important shape as well. Nowhere as important as triangles. But if you're going to fall asleep on a shape, I'm okay if it's honestly a quadrilateral. Why? Because you can kind of just fake your understanding of quadrilaterals if you understand triangles. After all, a square is just two triangles slapped together. A rectangle is two triangles slapped together. A parallelogram is two triangles slapped together. And even a trapezoid is two triangles slapped together. So if you know the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height, and you know that each of these are two triangles slapped together, then 1/2 BH plus 1/2 BH just equals a BH, and that's what we got here. Area is just BH. But just remember, just the same way it was in the world of triangles, bases and heights have to be perpendicular. So that tends to work everywhere except over here, because these are all right angles, here not so much. So make sure you just create a height. All right, with that then, I want to go ahead and take a look at a few questions here, starting off with this first one. This first question here is a good question. Notice what it says. In the diagram above, BD is 8, so you know this guy right here. It says AB is 6. It says ED is 5. And it wants to know what the area is of ABCE, meaning it wants to know this shape, which is obviously a trapezoid. Now, do I need to tackle this question from a trapezoidal perspective? No way. What I want to do on this is understand it in a slightly different way. Meaning, I want you to know what I would call the single most important formula not in your skill builder. And again, the concepts are all there, just these kind of stupid formulas are not. So what does this stupid formula mean? To me, S plus or minus S just means take a shape, add or subtract a shape, it gets you to another shape. On this question, it's not critical, because you do know how to solve for a trapezoid. You should know how to do it. But on other questions, you will not have the shape or the formula that you need. So question, when you look at this, any other ways that you see to tackle this question that I can do it without touching the trapezoid? Again, it's not necessary, but I want us to start to think about it. Yeah, that's good, Raju. The big triangle minus a small triangle. Jason's on the same tip. Great, Umar on the triangle tip. And I think someone said rectangle plus a triangle. I'm hoping it was a rectangle minus a triangle. So yeah, absolutely, Wheeling, and assuming Angelique and Molly are on the same tip. And I think that's absolutely right. So you got big tri minus the small tri. You've got the rectangle minus, maybe I'll call it the medium tri. And that's what this whole thing is about. So to me, as I look at this, I want to be flexible. Again, it does not matter on this question that I see path 2 or path 3. But, all right, great, Nathan. But on future questions, I want us to be thinking about this. So I just want to make sure I start to get this in our heads now. With that then, notice there are tons of dimensions missing. When we have all those dimensions missing, we could start to approach it from an area equals area perspective if the elements are there. If they're not there, and we start to have multiple triangles in the mix, another good way to do this is to think about the similarity we learned on the previous question. See if that kind of helps us here. I don't know if you mean is it greater. We don't have a lot of different things, but we can figure out a lot of the different things in theory. Yeah. What I'm going to say is we probably are going to find out all those dimensions anyhow, Jason, in order to get to those pieces anyways. But you know, sometimes some things speak to us better than others, but I'll leave it at that. So with that then, let's go ahead and put a minute 45 on this one. Let's talk when time's up. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. I love this comment from one of you who is crushing things to start. Not necessarily a math personality all in, but I just love his hunger to prepare better, to come to class, to executing, learning. Like, that's what this whole thing is about. Like, again, first of all, this class ain't hard. This test isn't hard. And I would just think that if I'm on the other side of this, and if I've paid what I'm paying, I actually even bother to show up for class. Like, again, if you don't show up, there's nothing to it. But if you show up, be ready. Be there to engage. Be there to get something out of it. Versus just mailing it in and then just checking the box and then being bitter later. Bitter at everybody except yourself. I think, which is why I got so bitter on Monday, because it was just a shit performance in here. But you guys are doing really nicely here to start. Remember, one more week, it's over. You guys are going to have to stick the landing, and it would be a shame if you don't. All right, so let's take a look at this question here. Again, if you did the Pythagorean on this, this is a problem. You cannot do Pythagorean. This is, after all, a 3, 4, 5 triangle. The reality is, if you see a 3, 4, 5 triangle on the test, you're effing something up. I mean, it's not, but kind of. Because that's so easy, so basic, and as a 99er, you want to see shit way past that, unless it's like question 1. And so what do? They tend to give you the 3, 4, 5. They just give it to you in those multiples. So if I got a 6, I got an 8, and I got the right angle, then of course this guarantees this to be a 10. And if I know that segment's a 5, then that forces that to be a 5. So we got some of the dimensions there starting to be plugged in, but still nowhere near what we need. And so now it's about trying to start to finish this out. Well, again, whenever you got those multiple triangles asked, you got some similarity potentially lurking. And I would argue here, you got a right angle, you got a right angle. That's beautiful. Then, of course, if you got them both sharing the end point, then you know at that point you've got two angles the same, which means the third one's guaranteed to be the same. You now have the big and the small being similar. If you are there, and you still want to then figure out the third, you can still get there. Remember, if this is parallel, and these are parallel lines, and this is then intersecting it here, then what do you have going on? This angle has to be the same as that. And now you're done. So, what do I have? Clearly a 2-to-1 ratio. If that's a 2-to-1 ratio, then that forces this 6 to be a 3 over here. It forces this 8 to be a 4 over there. So, in some sense, to Jason's question, I would argue that maybe path 2 is the best path of them all, in that now I don't even need to kind of figure out some of those other dimensions. But, you know, ultimately, let's just say I'm kind of blanking on how to solve for the area of a triangle for whatever reason, then I'd say path 1 is best. Of course, if I know how to solve for the area of the triangle, then why the F am I dicking around with path 3? So in some sense, I would argue path 3 is the worst, hands down. But it doesn't matter, whatever speaks to you ultimately. Because again, on this question, it doesn't matter. Someone might not look at this as a trapezoid. Someone might not even look at this as a big triangle minus a small triangle. Someone might look at it as, oh, this is a rectangle, subtract the medium. And again, on those other questions where you got to get creative, you want to start to have multiple ways to do it if possible. But either way, now we're able to start to finish this out. Since it is a quadrilateral here, I'll quickly, we figured out you could solve the area of the triangle if you want. Otherwise, if we know that this is a 4 and this is an 8, this is a 4. And thus, to solve for the trapezoidal area, it's just add up the bases, average them though. Right? Because if you take the big base, you'll overstate. If you take the small base, you'll understate it. So 3 plus 6 divided by 2, multiplied by that height, which is a 4. And thus you get to 18 pretty quickly. So what you find on a lot of these questions is that the math itself is not going to be complicated. It's going to be all about the setup. And it takes time to do the setup right. But again, if you start to see these moving pieces, you can do it pretty quickly. Nice job, folks. With that, then, I do want to take a look at this question here. I think this is a good question. It's also ready to start to reveal, again, people that should just drop the course now. Just log off, give it up. This is not a journey that's meant for everybody. That's the sad reality. And several of you have realized that along the way. And that's okay. Better to learn now than spend freaking 50 grand and be in the middle of your first year of business school and then be bitter and then drop out then. Or take this test 7 times only to get to that point. So you got to start to be a realist. And I think a question like this starts to help shine that light of realism in. So as you go to town on this question, if you do not see some ridiculous ass answers in the mix, that's a problem. That means you're probably going to pick them. Don't do it. Let's put 2 on the clock and then we'll talk. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. I love this comment that just came my way from one who was just crushing it. And I hate to be a dream killer in here for some, but it's the sad reality. So, she loves geometry. She's clearly very good at it. But this isn't going to get you over the finish line. I mean, yeah, it's great once you have all the other stuff in line. Everyone will see geometry. Again, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, geo's only for the advanced. Hell no. Everybody sees geometry. But if we're talking about 10 to 15% of the test, we're talking about like what? 3 to 5-ish questions? Like, why the hell am I going to spend a lifetime studying geometry if only 3 to 5 questions are geometry when it seems like, no joke, 31 of the 31 questions are arithmetic and algebra at their core? Like, that's where you start to realize, like, yeah, I guess I really need to get good at that basic stuff that doesn't seem very glamorous, but shit, it trips me up on every question. Like, even on a question like this, I could see how algebra might kick my ass on this. Like, I know how to do all the geo, but then I struggle finishing it in the time. Well, I gave you 2 minutes on test day. This is straight up, once you get to the end of the question mark, a 30-second question. So, like, if I'm not able to get to the right answer once I get to that question mark in 30 seconds, that's a problem, but that's not a week 5 problem. That's a week 1, week 2 problem. Specifically, I think week 2 more than anything, but question for you. What would you say are the 2 answers that you would say are the most ridiculous answers in the world on this question? Where just having a little bit of common sense would tell you, you can't be in it. Like, how is this even possible? And this is where, by the way, even if you don't know how to do shit, don't abandon common sense in the, at the door. Yeah, okay, good. Like, notice, here's the good news, by the way. And it always kills me if I ever see this. Like, nobody picked choice A, which is good. At least you're showing me some level of respect where you're saying, all right, I'm not just going to take 21 and subtract 19 and get to A. Like, I could see how people do it. People do it, by the way. That's bad. But here's what I do have, which is a bit of a problem. Perhaps some of you laughing at this guy saying, yeah, you idiot, man, drop the course now. Don't you know this is all about area? And area, you got to square stuff up. So clearly, choice B for my 760. When does HBS send me the invite for the interview and or the scholarship admissions and all that stuff? It's like, dude, how about never? Because you are obviously on a computer right now or some form of electronic device. If you manage to think about this being a 19-inch screen and then you pop this out, to 20, well, let's just say a plus, well, let's leave it, plus 2 there. Like, if I add 2 more inches out that direction, you think all I'm adding is 4 square inches of more screen space? Like, it doesn't even make sense. So, like, even if you don't do anything on this, you guess 1 and 3, that ain't gambling. I'm mathematically certain that will be correct because now I'm just using common sense. Most of you are there, not everybody. And I want to make sure you realize this. Again, that's not even strategy. Let me ask you this question. In word problems, words matter. I said that before, I'll say it again. What is the most important word on this question? This is a bit of an opinion, but I'd be curious to see what you thought, because maybe we can agree. If you see this word, I understand it's easy to finish, but if not, you have a tough time sticking the landing on this. Yeah, so I think, here's what I'm going to say. I think a lot of you are picking up on clearly diagonal is very important. After all, the diagonal starts to, tell you what those numbers are all about. I think the greater is important because it tells you it's all about the difference. But I am of the opinion, and area is obviously important too, but I am of the opinion that the word square is the most important word. And the only reason I say that, and again, it's an opinion on this one, we didn't all agree, which is fine, is because that tells me the shape. Like, some of us may have just struggled on this question because we just didn't know what the shape of the damn TV was. Like, well, how are you going to get to the end of the question mark and think that that's an unknown? Like, you're supposed to figure that element out. Hell no. That just means you misread the question somewhere at some point. That's what you should immediately be thinking. Not like, oh, wow, I don't know if I ever learned how to figure out what type of shape a TV will be. You can't be going down that road. Reset, reread. Read slower the second time, clearly. Because once you find out that this is a square, man, this ain't that hard. So, taking the first guy, which is a 21 incher, how do I figure out the area of a square? Well, clearly the side squared. But I don't know what the sides are here. I know the diagonal. Well, remember, if you take this and you cut it in half, this is obviously 90. That forces this to be 45. That forces that to be 45. So what are you left with? A 45, 45, 90, iso right triangle, a 1, 1, root 2. You know the side opposite the 90 is the 21. You're looking for the side opposite, essentially the 45. And thus, an S. I would say, hey, go bottom to top, so you're left with 21 over root 2 squared. That would be the area of that square. What do I do for the smaller one? Go through that again? Hell no. Why? I've already done it once. It's the same damn shit. Pull the 21 out, put the 19 in its place. This entire 4-line question boils down to this. This is what week 2 is all about. And of course some week 1 abilities to execute. So question, if I don't want to be a loser and I don't want to do long multiplication because long multiplication is for losers, what should I be able to see immediately on this question that takes me, honestly, again, I said 30 seconds more, but I'm being overly generous. It should be done in like 11 seconds. What do I need to recognize here to finish this out? The law of squares? I'll take that. It is a law. Everybody should freaking know it and everyone should be able to execute on it. Absolutely, Katrina here. Like, this isn't hard. You see a difference, you see a square, how do you not thank the GMAT gods at that point? You add them up, 40. You subtract them, 2. Root 2 squared is 2. All of it comes down to 40 as the final answer. Like, do I even know any of this other math? Hell no, I don't need to know it. The key is getting it done. Question. What if I didn't know the difference of squares? Any ideas on how I could get the right answer here without doing any of the math? This is kind of a bonus higher level thinking question now. We've talked about stuff like this before. Molly, not a bad way to think of things. It would be very complex if we did. Also remember that this is an expression, so we only have a handful of tools, as we talked about in week 2, that we can use, multiply by 1 being the chief tool. Well, that's what happens when you're sick. So here's what I would say. Yeah, that's kind of interesting that you're going down that road there. In that sense, Gabby, I like you know, a little bit of bringing it in, bringing it back. Here's what I would say. Think units, digits, guys. Not bad, Stephanie, either. I think things can get hairy that way. Like, again, let's imagine we got this far. If we got this far, all I need you to remember is 1 squared is a 1. 9 squared is a 1. 1 minus a 1 is a 0. 0 in the numerator, 2 in the denominator. What does that tell you the unit digit has to be? By definition, either a 0 or a 5. Like, don't forget units digits, guys. Like, so even if some of the, like, because I know for a fact some of you guys went to town multiplying shit. There's never a reason to do it. Either you're seeing the shortcut from a formula that you know, or you're thinking about some of the stuff we learned as early as day effing 1 in here to get things done. So just make sure you keep that in mind. All right, how about this next guy here? I think this is a good question. Again, it's a word problem where words matter. If you don't know the most important wording in the question, you're missing it. Let's put 2 on the clock and then we'll talk. All right, let's take a look at this question here. I like the way this has gone, folks. Most of you guys getting this right. Very few of you guys going sucker on me. I do have some crappier answers on the board, which is a little bit more worrisome, I suppose. So let me ask you this. What would you say is the most important wording on this question that you needed to see, and if you didn't see it, you'd again be stuck swimming in circles and perhaps even setting it up the wrong way? Yeah, awesome, awesome, awesome. So you guys are definitely picking up on that language there. It's all about being contained within that property. If you did not see that, it's so easy to set this up and get this wrong. And here's what kills me. As I'm looking at some of you who got this question wrong, you are still telling me, though, in the main chat room what the most important language is correctly. So then the question is, was it a misunderstanding of it, or was it just a realization that came after the fact? And if it came after the fact, I will take it. I'll still be happy about it. Of course, we want to make sure that on your end, you're doing it a little bit sooner moving forward. You ain't going to have the luxury of being able to stop after a question, break it down, and so on test day. And so here, yeah, it's important to be able to see, all right, this is a 60 by 80. We know this is all 5 feet, 5 feet, 5 feet. And because it's 60 by 80 on the outside, because the road's contained within, then we just got to figure out what this dimension is going to be, because I can't really figure out the area of that weird shape. It's a border, of course. I got to start to think about shapes, plus or minusing shapes to get me there. And for me, as I look at something like this, I think a big rectangle minus a small rectangle makes it very easy to get the cutout. And thus, if this is 60 and that's 5 and that's 5, forces that to be a 50. If this is 80 and this is 5 and this is 5, forces that to be a 70. And now you're just looking at essentially 6 times 8 is 48, 5 times 7 is 35, that's a 13. Add on a couple zeros. Not a lot of math needed. The hardest part was clearly the reading, as well as, in some sense, the plugging of it all. But as long as you can stay on top of that, then clearly you can get to where you need to be with not a lot of work. All right. With that, then, I kind of want to wrap up the world of quadrilaterals. I want to shift gears and get into the world of circles next. Circles are an important part of this test. I would say it's probably the second most important shape of them all. Not because they show up more frequently. Remember, first of all, we're only talking about 3 to 5 questions anyhow. But then on top of which, triangles are so damn heavy, so what are you going to get? Maybe one circle question? I don't even know. Maybe 2 at most. But the idea there, if you're getting 5 questions in general, but the idea here is that they're unique. And because they're unique, you want to spend some time with them. Obviously, you know all the basic properties here. The only thing I want to talk about real quickly is how I like to kind of think about arc length. And start to set this up in a very, I would say, easy to understand fashion. So remember what arc length is at its core. I would argue it's perhaps the crust on a slice of pizza. And if I see it that way, and I understand that everything is proportional part to whole, then I would say, hey, this crust on this slice is proportional to the entire pizza crust. So that's arc to the circumference. The same way this central angle is part to the whole, which is 360. And thus, if I ever need to solve for the arc length, all I gotta say is, there we go, all I gotta say is take the circumference, roll it to the other side, and multiply it by a central angle over 360. So that's the nature of that formula. On the same note, there will be times where you'll have to figure out the sector area, meaning maybe how much cheese coverage you have on a slice of pizza. Well, then in that case, it's going to be proportional to the same thing, part to whole. So the sector will be proportional to the entire area, the same way the central angle is to the 360. And thus, if I ever need to solve for the sector, I just take the area and multiply it by central angle over 360. So I like to think of things in this sort of three-way relationship because it starts to make you understand, hey, it's just part to whole. That's really what it's about. All right, with that then, let's go ahead and take a look at a few questions, starting off with some basic stuff, but then very quickly get into some of the more challenging questions even of the night. So I want to start with this first guy here. Again, I think it's a good question. It's not as easy as that first one, but bring some respect on it. Let's put 2 on the clock and then we'll talk. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. And yeah, to whoever asked Megan that question, you definitely don't want to, I can understand the need to want to cut the corner and just buy some flashcards. But man, the ability to even making them is a good way to go. But also, you know, yeah, that's what I'll say. But if you're going to resist that, there are plenty of places I'm sure you can Google free flashcards for basic concepts all over the place. And I think a lot of apps are there too if you're mobile driven and so on. But I would strongly advise you to take Megan's advice. All right, let's take a look at this. Now, here's my warning on this. You want to be careful with data sufficiency geometry. I might have mentioned as much even last week. A lot of people screw up data sufficiency because they mark up diagrams and they forget that they've marked them up, and before you know it, their analysis gets mucked up because they're using a diagram that's not truly representative of what that statement is telling them. So I tend to not mark up a diagram until I'm about to combine them. And of course, if I'm never combining them, then in theory, I'm not marking up the diagram. If that's not something that works well for you, like I tend to mark them up mentally, if that doesn't work, after drawing it down on my page though, mind you, if that doesn't work well for you, then consider possibly drawing up two diagrams, one for statement 1 and one for statement 2. So here, notice what the question says. In the above figure, what's the area of the center with the circle, area of the circle with center C? So that's really just asking for pi r squared, which really means just what is r. If you solve for the area, again, consider it a fail. You're screwing that up. Statement 1, statement 2, always start with the easier statement first. I would argue that statement 2 without a doubt, because the first one just looks longer and more difficult to even translate. You're telling me a chord length. Now, I'm not going to write an 8 in there because I'm not ready to combine anything, but you've just basically told me that AB is 8. Does that get me anywhere close to the radius? Hell no. So not one single person picked choice B, which is good. But I do have someone picking D, which again is very bad. So to me, you know, even if you get this question wrong, you should be in 1 and 3 within split seconds. And partly why I do believe DS does become your new best friend. Now you look at statement 1, and what does it say? The length of minor arc AB is. So pause at the verbs, translate, write what you read as you read. So if you're trying to get me to think about what this arc length is, I know it's got to be the central angle, so ACB over 360 times 2 pi r, that's going to give me the arc length, is equal sign 1/6 of, so 1/6 multiply the circumference, so that's 2 pi r. 2 pi r's cancel, and I'm left with ACB over 360 is 1/6, or bring the 360 over here, 360 over 6 is just 60, so ACB is 60 degrees. That's what statement 1 tells me. How's knowing a degree measurement going to be enough to get anything done? Nothing at all. So this is just a 50-50 shot. But notice even me marking up this diagram didn't mark anything really up. I'm just drawing some lines, so I'm okay with that level of markup. But now if I start putting some values in, namely a 60 degrees right there, and 8 over there, I can do it because I'm now down to the C or E. I'm supposed to combine them at this point. But now I'm kind of stuck. I'm stuck because I don't know really what to do. I know that triangles, when in doubt, will bail me out, so here's my question to you. What is interesting about a triangle in a circle that you see like this one? Again, almost ignore the 60 degrees for a second. I think that takes it to the next level. But in general, what should I be on the lookout for when I'm dealing with these types of shapes, folks? And this is now, I'd say, top of the level, top of the pyramid type stuff. That's for, so absolutely, Molly, I want to get there. And to Gabby's point, that's going to be the case if it were 90. This is not a very good 90 here. I mean, it's not 90, but if it were a right angle, you'd be absolutely right there, Gabby. Because remember, heights have to be perpendicular, and the way I've drawn it clearly looks almost like perpendicular. But to me, what I want to make sure we definitely do see is just the fact that the radii are indeed the sides. And because the radii are the sides, I want to make sure we start to see isotriangles in, all right, good stuff, lady. You start to see that isotriangles in circles are rampant. And thus, just be on the lookout for them. But what's interesting about this guy is if you know this is isosceles, so this line is this line, which means then this angle and this angle are the same. Well, what's the difference? If that's 60, that means it's 120 left over. I got to split the 120 evenly. Gets me to 60 degrees each of those guys. Well, if that's 60 and that's 60, and we already knew that was 60, I think I just found me an equilateral on my hands. And that makes sense, because an isosceles just means at least two sides are equal, and it could include a third side being equal. And so to me, taking it even another step forward, a bigger takeaway perhaps, is anytime I got a 60 degree in the mix and an iso, it really forces it to be an equilateral. And thus, last week when we did some DS, there was a more difficult data sufficiency geo question. I said, hey, I just want to lay out the foundation, come back and revisit it next week. Now it should be, in retrospect, pretty damn easy, because it was all about having an iso triangle with one of them being 60. So now if I know it's equilateral, of course I know the size, which means I now know the radius. Choice C is final answer. And for me, if you look at the poles here, I'll take ACE. Really the best wrong answer, of course, is E on this one. And again, the poles don't lie. You start to see how far away D is from this. So it's like, the guy in D can't be complaining that, oh, this model sucks, man. No, it's like, you suck. This model isn't built for you. Come to a question more prepared, so you're not picking something like choice D and feeling like it's a good move. That's all I want you to start to see here. All right. With that, then, I want to take a look at this next question. I think this is a good question. I think it's a harder question. It's a harder question because there are a lot of moving pieces here. Notice what it says. In the circle above, diameter, MN, has a length of 12. Now typically when you get a diameter, I tend to just get rid of it immediately and put it into a radius form of sorts, so just so that I'm more easily able to manipulate things. It tells me KL is parallel to MN. Again, part 1 of the skill below tells me parallel lines intersected, starts to create some equal angles. KLM is 25, so that's at 25, which forces this guy to be 25. What, question word, slam those brakes, is the length of the minor arc, KL? I just want to know what this segment is. Well, you already know from crushing the skill builder, you need to find that central angle. So you need to get to a KOL, central angle over 360 times 2 pi r, but you know the radius is now 6. So all you need to do is figure out this angle. And this question is basically done. But it's easier said than done. There will be people in here who will have zero shot at doing this. But that's okay. As long as you're able to start to understand what a minor arc is all about. Think about what a minor arc is. It's the short way there. Like, there's a reason I colored this segment and I didn't color this segment. I could have done KL like this, but that would have been a really big yellow line. That would be also what they would call a major arc. This is just the minor arc, the short way. Major is the long way. If I understand that distinction, and then I actually think about a little bit how a minor arc relates back to the circumference of a circle, not the formula, shit, I just gave us the freaking formula of sorts, but just logically the relationship that exists, you can eliminate 3 out of these 5 answers immediately. Like, you don't even need to dick around with anything. You could be 50-50 on this and move on. Because some of us love geometry and we're really good at it. Some of us hate geometry and we're really bad at it. And thus, if I'm behind on the clock right now and I'm just trying to catch up and I suck at geometry, this isn't going to be the question where I'm like, you know what? This is where I'm going to make my last stand. I know today's the day I'm going to get this geo question right. Ignore the fact that I usually get about 13% of the geo questions right whenever I do a problem set. Today's the day I'm going to knock it out. Bullshit. You're about to eat it on this one too. And then it's all it's going to do is waste your time and rock your confidence. Might as well make a smart move. And here, I think you can get it down to 50-50 within seconds, so why wouldn't you? With that then, let's put 2 on the clock. Let's at least get there. Let's hopefully finish this out. Let's talk when time's up. All right, guys, some great comments coming my way via private chat. And again, my apologies if some of you feel like my private chats are dragging today. Dude, I got so many yellow bubbles up, which is great. That means we fucking have a pulse in here today, which is always nice to see. But I want to comment on this. First of all, I thought, a great comment from one of you. Again, no pride at all. And because some people would be like, oh, I don't need to do the skill builder twice. Only the idiots do that. It's like, no. Unless you've crushed it 6 ways to Sunday, there's no shame to doing it. And it's clearly paying off for her, which I love to see. But I also want to comment on the second one, because I really love this comment. And from one of you who, is starting to turn things around, is what I will say. And why? Because you're checking your ego at the door. It's like, I don't need to read this shit slowly. Don't you know who I am? Yeah, I know who you are. Your scores seem to suggest you're not who you think you are. That's all. End of story. And so as you go through these questions here, if you show just that level of respect, that level of attention, that level of detail and care to it, man, this thing is so damn easy. All right, with that then, let me ask you this question. what is the relationship here between the minor arc and the circumference of a circle? That's the most important thing, I think, on this question. If I can figure that out, at least that's going to help me moving forward. Not everyone did, and it makes me sad. Because this is supposed to be easy. This isn't tough. What do you guys think on this? Yes, absolutely right here. So definitely it's got to be smaller because it is the short way there, which is good. But I want to make sure you're seeing what Jonathan is saying, guys, because that's very important. I'm not going to lie, I'm worried here. Just because we're getting this question right doesn't mean we're on that road to the 99. I like what Jonathan is saying. You got to start to see that it's got to be less than half the circumference. Very, very important. Because it will always be less than the circumference. Always. Always. But, yeah, good stuff there, Molly and Stephanie and Angelique. Like, if you notice here, like, there are some truly dog shit answers on the poll. Like, why is anybody in D&E? That just tells me I'm 1 in 5 in this. And if you're 1 in 5 in this, again, go back to what I say. No offense intended, but fire under your ass is what it is. Remember, I said only the idiots guess 1 in 5. Like, so by the fact, if I'm already just guessing 1 in 5, I accept my fate right then and there that I ain't going to crush this test. And that's the sad thing. All you need to do is just a little bit of effort. And you should be able to increase your odds 1 and 2. Now, I don't know how realistic this question is, because I think choices D and E are so out there that they are just borderline comedy. Because remember, if the radius is 6, you know the entire circumference for this circle is 12 pi. How am I ever going to have a piece of it, or a fraction of it, so to speak, ever be bigger than it? It's impossible. So even if nothing else, I could just say, hey, minor arc is less than the circumference, and just say, please, GMAT gods, give me one answer less than 12 pi, and I'm good. But if I go a step further and realize, well, it's a minor arc because it's a short way there, then I could say, what defines short versus long? It's got to be the halfway point. So let me just find somebody who's less than half of it. Show me somebody who's less than 6 pi, and I'm done. Okay, you screw me. You give me 2. But did you really screw me? It took me 3 seconds to get to this realization. I can't finish this out because I don't have time. I know how to do it. It's just that this is question 31, and I kind of ate it earlier on a similar triangle question. Oh well. At least I go out with a fighting chance. Not some of this nonsense. But let's assume it's not 31, and it's actually question 12, and I have plenty of time to do this. Then I will. It's time to start figuring things out. But I'm stuck right now because I don't know what to do. That's okay. Just ask yourself why. So question, why are they giving me this angle here? Like, clearly I know those are inscribed angles. What am I supposed to do with those angles? Like, of what value do those things serve here? For me, at least. Asking that question, why? Yeah, awesome. It goes back to the central angle. Absolutely, Gabby and Patrick. And Carl, you're absolutely right. It'll get us there eventually to that middle angle if what you're saying is KOL. But it's like anytime I ever have an inscribed angle, it always comes back to the central. Yeah, awesome. Molly, Stephanie, Felipe, Angela. Like, and that to me is important because check it. Like, let's just say I didn't know that now. How the hell am I not furiously writing down on my little takeaway sheet, my yellow pad, not my yellow pad's useless, in a notebook somewhere, on an error log, on a flashcard, saying, hey, anytime you see an inscribed angle, be on the effing lookout for a central. Because you know, like, if you crush the skill builder, you got to know the formula. Oh yeah, 1/2 central angle. Like, if you don't know that, log off. Like, what are you doing here? But that ain't enough to know. You got to be actively seeking out. Like, that's the difference between a 99er and the rest. We know a lot, but then we know what to then go do with it. We know then what to go look out for. So to me, you see something like this, you're like, okay, the only effing reason you're giving me this at 25 is so that you could tell me that KOM right here is a 50. Same thing, if you're giving me LMN is 25, you're only doing that to tell me that LON is 50. Why is that important? Because I clearly need to get to the middle. I know if I have 3 angles on a straight line add up to 180 and I got 100 on the others, that's got to be an 80 in the mix. And thus you're done. Zeros cancel, 2 6 is 12, 36 is 3, 8/3 pi, final answer. So the actual math here, a joke. But notice how many different concepts were arguably tested here. Do I understand to go to diameter to radius? Maybe. Do I understand parallel lines intersecting? Maybe. Do I understand inscribed angles and central angles? Maybe. Do I understand straight lines add up to 180? Maybe. Oh, and by the way, do I understand how to do arc length? Maybe. And so on a question like this, which has so many different facets to it, if you have a tough time with any one loose piece, it could be a struggle. Well, after that, just guess 1 and 2, and you should be okay. And my hope is that some of you did guess. Maybe you guessed 1 and 3, at least because a lot of you figured out it's got to be less than the central angle, and maybe you got lucky. Some of you clearly knew it was less than half, so maybe you got lucky. And there's no shame to that. You know, one of you fessed up earlier. He's like, yeah, man, I'll be honest, you know, I may be crushing things today, but I guessed on that one. I got it down to 50-50. I'm going to go. It's like, don't be embarrassed by that. I would thump my chest with pride if that happened. Because that, to me, is just an indication that, hey, I'm starting to learn to think like the Vegas test taker. And if I could do that, man, that's what it's all about. All right, with that then, I want to put up this next question here. I think this is a good question. I think it's a tough question. It's an interesting question, though, because there are no numbers at all provided in the actual question itself. And then there are nothing but percentages in the answer choices. And for me as a 99er, that tells me how I should even start to respond almost immediately, because it's all about triggers and responses, something that I'm trying to get you to focus your attention on, crafting in this journey solid takeaway. So for me, I think, hey, this is as good a time as any to start picking numbers out of the sky. I could do this algebraically, because again, I may not suck at algebra as badly as I claim to, but I also understand I got to be flexible, and depending on the circumstances, I got to be able to shift my strategies accordingly. And so when I look at something like this, what I would say to you is, be careful though. Because again, like so many questions, is ready to punish people who go into autopilot mode. Don't do it. Here's what the plan's going to be. Let's take our final break now. We'll put 5 on the clock. I got no problem if you cheat and do this question during that time. It's a little bit more challenging anyways. If you're done with it, great. If you're not, when we start the class back up, I'll throw 2 minutes on as the official timer on the question. The only thing I'd say is don't look at the answers during the break. So with that, let's take our break, 5 on, and then we'll get back to work. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a crack at this question. Again, bring some respect. Let's put 2 on the clock and then we'll talk. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. Decent performance on the board, not great. Tried to give us even a little bit more time so we could try to get some better answers in. What's interesting to me is it does look like, again, number 1 wrong answer is the classic sucker on this. So let's make sure we start to figure out, even from a gambling perspective, how we could have made a better move, folks. So let me ask you this to start here. Obviously, this is a question about percent greater. Percent greater is the same thing as just percent change. Percent greater, percent smaller, percent increase, percent decrease. That is just new minus old over old, or new over old minus 1. That's the percent change question. There is only one other type of percent question you will ever face. What is that only other type of percent question you will ever face on test day, folks? It is very important you know this. If not, it's kind of an arithmetic problem. And it's one where even if you don't know how to do this question, you can pretty quickly eliminate some answers and start to figure things out. Don't tell me this is the triple witching hour, guys. Is it hour 3 and we're done? Is this like deja vu? All right. I'll give up at this point. No, I won't give up just yet. Can we at least write down somewhere on our to-do list? We got to go back to week 1 arithmetic. Or should I give us like another 5 more minutes? Only Stephen Chen knows. Are my expectations unrealistic at this point to think that we should have more than 2 people knowing that the only other type of arithmetic percent change, percent question you should have is percent of? Is that an unrealistic expectation, guys? You tell me right now if that's being unrealistic, and then at that point, I will dial this back. Or is it realistic? I want to know. What do you guys think? Is it realistic or is it unrealistic? We're like week 5 of the course. Is that unrealistic? You know, like, because right now I'm like, this fucking class sucks. Like, at this point, like, what are we doing? Like, should we just end it now? Like, why are we here? Like, we were doing pretty good, but maybe it's like week 5 and we just want the course to be over, which is cool, I get it, but then why we even come to class? Like, why do you make me show up? Like, I'm going to get paid no matter what, so it's like, why make me go through this? All right, so you guys are saying it's realistic, which is fair. That's all I want to know. Like, I think it's realistic. So, like, my disappointment should be pretty palpable at this point. I think all of you should be feeling like, what the F? I'm appreciative that Stephen Chen sees that it should be a percent of. I like Umar sees it as being times because it's the same damn thing. So can I at least get a commitment from you guys that, like, right now, somewhere on a flashcard, you're furiously writing away, hey, percent change versus percent of, don't ever effing forget that. Because a lot of you got this question wrong, and to me it's stupid because I don't even care if you don't know how to get the question right, but you should not have gotten it wrong in the way that you did. Because I've taught you guys before, hey, think like the Vegas test taker is really a simple strategy. It just says, hey, look, man, some idiot out there is going to answer the wrong question. He always does. The polls don't lie. Some of you are doing it right now. And thus, if I can just think that the way someone could screw this up is that instead of answering the percent change, all they're going to do is answer the percent of. And in that case, what are they going to forget? The -1. Because it's just new over old. That's all it is. And if I can acknowledge that, then I'll just look at this and I'll say, hey man, let me find answers that are off by 100% and pick the smaller of the two. So like when I look at this, I say, damn dude. When I look at this, I see that choice A here is off by 100% with choice C. So I say, you know what, I bet you choice A is a good answer and choice C is a sucker answer. Then I look at B and I look at D and I'm like, you know what, I bet you like B is a good answer and I bet you like D is the sucker answer. Then I look at C and I look at E and I'm like, holy shit, well maybe actually C is a good answer and E is a sucker. Of course D can't be 100% smaller than anything, so D is out. E can't be 100% smaller than anything, so E is out. And given that I'm getting a little bit of mixed messages with choice C, the gambler in me wouldn't pick this either. I'd be down to A versus B on this one pretty damn quickly. And it kills me. Because I have people down here, which again, probably suggestive of some trap action answering occurring. And so does it, by the way, does it mean I'm guaranteed to be right if I'm in the AB world? No. But some of you have no shot at getting this question right. Again, that's realistic. And if I have no shot at getting it right, like, what do I have to lose to gamble? Like, nothing at all. So to me, we need to start to be aware of, again, what types of questions people are going to answer incorrectly, how they go about doing it. That's top of the pyramid shit, guys. Like, again, if you are here today because you want to learn how to solve for the area of a circle, wrong place, man. I don't care about that stuff. I don't want to get you to a 600. Anything less than a 99 is, again, a bust. Not that I truly mean that, of course. Hey, if I can get to a 710, I'm happy. If all I ever came into this course was try to get me a 600, I'm thrilled. Shit, if I can get to a 500 and I'm a 200 level guy to start, that's a huge victory. But you have to be hungry. And I feel like sometimes people just aren't hungry in here. It's like, why you waste your time? With that, then, let's then finish this out. And again, there's no diagram provided. Draw it out. This isn't hard. Circle A inscribed in a square. Okay, that means all those sides touch. That's circle A. Then it says the square is inscribed within a circle. So now there's a circle that goes around it. That's circle B. And imagine this kind of touches there. It says the area of B is what percent greater than the area of A. So that's really B minus A over A, or B over A minus 1. Now, if I'm going to do that, I know I don't want to trip over my own 2 feet. Quickest way for me to do this the right way, I would argue, is setting up a little chart that makes it idiot-proof. Got radius, got area. But the one thing that I would strongly recommend you do is, again, be intelligent even how you set this up. If I know ultimately I need a B over A, why not even set this up with row 1 being a B, row 2 being an A? And then just start to kind of pick some numbers to make your life easy. You know I suck at math. Bigger the number, the bigger the mistake. So if I just start with something simple, like a good old 1, it makes it very easy for me to figure out the area. Now, can I go and pick a value for B? Hell no. Because if I do that, then I'm just making up answers as I go along. Can't do that. I could start part of the process, then I got to start to back into the rest of it. The only problem now is I don't know what to do with B. It's kind of tough, and that's okay. This is a tougher question. So then what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to ask why. Why are you giving me all this damn information about these squares if I'm not even using it to solve for the damn answer choice? So why are they giving me that square? What is that of value to me here? How am I supposed to use that to get this process going? Yeah, awesome, Carl. Solid, Molly and Tom and Raju, Felipe, Jonathan. Saw another name scroll off my list today. Great, Umar. It's, again, the idea is, hey, remember, when in doubt, let triangles help you out. Like that, I think, is a very helpful back pocket strategy to have. And so for me, as I look at something like this, I gotta say, hey, can I draw a freaking line there? And it's like, yeah, I think I can. That diagonal looks certainly like the diameter. Excellent, P.U. and Steven as well. And it's like, all right. Only question is, how can I get those dimensions? Well, check it. You know the side of that square is going to be the diameter of that boy, which means that's a 2. If that's a 2, that's a 2. That's a 2 root 2. Half of that is a root 2. Square that up, you're at 2 pi. 2 pi over pi is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. Choice B, shockingly, becomes the right answer. One of the 2 answers we would have gambled with. And of course, choice D, classic sucker answer. And get this, I'm looking at some of the people picking choice D here, and it's some of you who are doing very well today. What happened? Overplayed your hand. You forgot for a second, like, wait, one of you commented to me via, I was like, hey, what's with freaking not only the breaks being on time, but you giving us extra time to do a question? I said, hey, it's kind of a little bit of a harder question. I'm okay giving you some more time. But it's like, nah, I want to be disrespectful on this. Well, false negative. Tell the test maker you're dumber than you are. And then what happens? Right now, let's just say this is a 700 level question and it's a tougher question. You know how to do this if you're in choice D, frankly. Unless it's a random guess. But I'm seeing some of the names, and they are some good ones. If I know how to do this question, and which means I can get a 700 level question right, where should I be next? Clearly, let's say I should be up at the 740s. Let's just say, hypothetically, bump me up another 40 points. Let me see if I can go there. And I clearly can do a 700, so maybe I belong in the 740s. But what is the test maker going to do? Sit my ass back down to a 660. So all of a sudden, where I should have been looking at a 740 level question, I'm now looking at a 660 level question. And that's where things start to go awry, guys. All right, with that then, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. Last circle question in the mix here. I think this is a good one. And notice what it says. It wants to know what the area of the shaded region is. There's no effing formula that you have right now that gives you that shaded region. So what am I supposed to use? The most important formula not in your skill builder, the S plus or minus S getting you to an S. Find some shapes you like, find some shapes you don't like, add them, subtract them, get to where you need to be. Let's put 2 on the clock and then we'll talk. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. Even this one, I feel like if you had no shot at getting it right, you could have made some great gambling style moves, just thinking about how people are going to eat it. And again, it's not, let me rewind and just be explicitly clear on this. I don't want you doing this on test. I want you to execute the damn question. Finish it out because you know how to do it. But I'm a realist. I know for a fact that on test day, we are all, 99ers included, but especially if you're less than that, even more so, going to face these questions where you're going to say, I have no effing clue how to do this. I should have freaking prepped more. But that's okay. As long as you're trying to make use of what you've been learning in here, which granted at times are roguish strategies, but they still pay off hugely. So here, when you notice what you got to be doing, you got to figure out the shaded region. Well, let's first start by figuring out what the shapes are that we need to add and subtract. So question, what would you use as your setup on this? That's the most important part. You need, if you want to take a minute and a half to figure out the setup, you got 30 seconds to execute, and that's plenty of time. What shapes did you use to get this going? Definitely a triangle is in the mix. So there's certainly a triangle, but what do we do with the triangle? We can't just solve for a triangle. Connecting those centers is absolutely huge. Yep, we know the radius is 6, so great, sides of 12. When in doubt, triangles, baby, absolutely. And then, exactly, Jason, start pulling out those sectors. Absolutely right. So if I can start pulling out those sectors, great there, Gabby, then that's all you got to do. But notice how many sectors? 3. Very important to realize that. Because what's someone going to do on this one? Forget 3. Why is that important? Well, think about what you know. You know area of a triangle does not involve pi. You know area of a circle, which ultimately sectors do, involve pi. What does that tell me? As a gambler right now who has no ability or time or maybe even interest in doing this question, I'd say, man, please GMAT gods, give me one answer that's got the pi component tripled and the front component the same. And I'll just pick that. The bigger one, the tripled one. Because I know some idiot out there is going to screw this up. So then when I look at this, I say, okay, what do I got on the board? These don't have the front ends the same, I'll ignore them. These have the front end the same, now I'll look on the back end and see which of these is a tripling. These look to be a tripling. This looks like it's the right answer, this looks like it's the sucker. Now, could I be wrong? Of course I could be wrong. I'm gambling. I may have miscounted the cards at the table. Oh well, sucks to be me. I'm not going to go crying to the pit boss for my money back. But if I'm right, hey man, I'm a happy camper that night. And so to me, that's all you want to start to be thinking about. So if I have nothing else in the world about to work out in my favor, I'm picking choice D and I'm going to see what happens. But here's the kicker on this one. And again, I don't know how realistic this question is. What you start to realize is even with some pure approximation, choices A, B, and C all go negative on me. Meaning if I approximate pi for 3-ish, if I approximate rad 3 for, this becomes a little bit more difficult, but even 1.7-ish, then guess what happens? Negative, negative, negative. How can I ever have a negative area? It's impossible. So even right off the bat, even if I don't understand this high-level gambling strategy of sorts, I should be down to 50-50 on this. And that is math certainty. So I don't know if the test will do that. If they do that, consider it a gift. So even if I know nothing else, I know area is non-negative, I can approximate, boom, make it happen. But this is all bullshit. I still need to know how to finish this out. Well, you know equilateral triangle, we learned this earlier. This is s squared root 3 over 4. Minus 3 sectors. What's a sector? Central area, central angle over 360 times pi r squared. And to me, this is the English. I've never faulted anybody for putting equations in English first. This is the algebra, or I guess the geometry. Translate English to geometry, get the formulas down. This has to be instant recall. You cannot dick around now with 3069s or anything of the sort. You leverage what you've already learned from a previous question. And now, what do? Plug and chug. So what do I know? Ugh, damn. So you know the sides here are 12. And again, some of you may wonder, why is it equilateral? Because if the sides are the same, you know the angles are the same. And so then I know the sides are 12 minus central angles are all 60. And of course the radius is 6. So zeros cancel, 6's cancel, you're at minus 18 pi. So even if you want to stop your journey at that point, you could, because you could say, hey, I'm looking for an answer that gets me an 18 pi, like for whatever reason, if that's where you want to tap out or you're running behind on time. And then over here, everybody should know 12 squared is 144. Nobody should try to divide it by 4 though. Why? Because the bigger the number, the bigger the mistake if you suck at math. So what are you supposed to do? Look to cancel. Much easier to just say 36 rad 3. And again, shockingly, a gamble on this one will pay off. But again, if you've been keeping score this entire time, it's not as though we get every gambling move done. In fact, in week 3 word problems, if I recall correctly, the gambling gods had forsaken us at that time. And it's like, okay, oh well. Even at times, you know, our luck starts to run out. But if it doesn't, why the hell do you not run with it? All right, so nice move on the D's. E's, less so. I don't even understand why B is the most popular wrong answer on the board. All right, let's be done with the world of circles. Let's now get into the rest of the geo. This stuff is not as important as what I would say. So for those of you that are really good at coordinate geo, I'm sorry to say that. Even 3D shapes aren't as important. You got to know your 2D stuff down cold, guaranteed you'll be seeing that. 3D is nice because it's just 2D taken to the next level of sorts. Coordinate, less so. But hey, if I'm looking to crush this test, and I am, then of course I want to understand this backwards and forwards as well. Obviously a lot of concepts are in the skill builder. Make sure you revisit them. I would say this is the most abstract of everything we do here today. At least with shapes, you see them everywhere. 3D shapes, we live in that world. But coordinate geo, less so. Especially all the slope intercept crap. So if you find yourself having to go to some junior high level website involving point intercepts and all this bullshit, then do it. There's no reason not to have the fundamentals underlying it all rock solid. So let's start with some basic questions here, and then we'll kind of take a look at another one or two, but they're not terribly tough. In fact, I would argue this question here is as easy can get, except for one thing. So if you've taken to heart what I've said to you before, is that 99ers, we're not reactive, we're proactive. We're not afraid to rewrite questions to answer questions we want to answer, not the ones they ask us to answer. Then you do that here, it becomes very easy. If not, I could see why it could take time and make your life more miserable. Let's put 2 on the clock and then we'll talk. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. So notice what we've got here. Everything is in slope-intercept format. Everything is coming back to the triangle. Everything is with the origin of this being essentially the vertex of the triangle of sorts. So then that forces you only to figure out y-intercepts and x-intercepts. Everything has the same sloped sign. They're all negative. Everything has the same sign for the intercepts. They're all positive, the y-intercepts that is. So they've done everything as easy as they possibly can on this question with the exception of all the damn decimals. You know fractions are friendly, decimals are deadly. There's no reason not to change these into a fractional format. And if you do that, and it'll take a few seconds to do it, it starts to pay off on the back end. So I would argue this is, again, a little bit of an example of slowing down to speed up. The payoff is immense. So if I see, hey, and again, I would chart this without a doubt. I don't want to trip over my own feet here. So if that's the equation, you got y-intercepts, you got x-intercepts, and then, of course, you got the area. And so then I would kind of, let's see if I can not run out of room here. So then I would say, all right, I've got y equals a negative 1/2 x plus 2. I got a y equals a negative quarter x plus 1. And then I got a y equals a negative quarter x plus 2. And then a y equals a negative x plus 2. Now, do I need all this y equals? No. But, you know, if I just feel better writing it, I can live with it. I got no problems with it. Now, y-intercepts all the way down. Just take the last line there. X-intercepts. In an ideal world, I know it's negative b over m because I memorized it, I did the skill builder, so on and so forth. But if I don't know it, that's okay. Remember, I've always said it's a battle between memorization versus derivation. So I didn't do a good job memorizing, I better do a damn good job deriving. And so how does the actual x-intercept work? Remember, it's where it intercepts the x-axis. So that means I got to solve for x. Well, what is y's value? Always 0. So then if I bring the b over, I get to a negative b, then I divide by m, and I get negative b over m. Do it in a vacuum first. Don't sit here and try to solve for the x-intercept separate on each of these. It takes too much damn time. So then once you, of course, either remember it or figure it out, then you say, okay, so it's the negative of this divided by that. Well, negatives drop because everything cancels out, so it's basically 2 over 1/2, which is 4, 1 over 1/4, which is 4, 2 over 1/4, which is 8, and 2 over 1, which is 2. And that's it. So now, if you say, well, damn, that was a lot easier, or if you say, damn, that looks still tough, then go into Google and type in dividing fractions. It should not be challenging. But I could tell you from a decimal point of view, that's a pain in the ass. So now what am I supposed to do? 1/2 BH, but why do I want to do 1/2 BH on every single one? What a waste of time. If I understand that 1/2 is common to everything, then just leave it as BH. I get 2 times 4 is 8. I should look for half of that. This is, this isn't, this is. 1 and 3. Final answer, choice E. So again, you know, even if you read the books, even our books, we'll sit there and do all the area. You can do it. It's a textbook way to do it. But if you're ever doing things the textbook way, you're probably doing it the long way. And the long way is the wrong way. You know that. All right, how about this next question here? I think this is a nice data sufficiency question. It's one of the last data sufficiency questions we're going to see. I think we got 1 or 2 more in the can next week, and that's it, folks. Notice what it says. It says, is circle J centered on the origin? Statement 1 says point XO is on the circle. Statement 2 says point negative XO is on the circle. What answer choices should you be down to immediately on this? Like, you don't even need any time to be burned off the clock. You're immediately thinking it's either this or that. Where should you be on this one pretty damn quickly? I guess my definition of pretty quickly is different than your definition of pretty quickly. All right, good. Whew. I was ready to give up entirely, my God. All right, shoo. All right, good. C versus E. Absolutely right. And again, think about why here for a second. How the hell is knowing 1 point ever going to be enough? Impossible. A, B, D dead. So even if you get this question wrong, it doesn't matter. You're at least in C or E. But now, what does the reward system teach you? It just says, hey man, look up or look down. So if you think C is going to be the right answer, you better look down. If you think E is the right answer, you better look up. One of them is right, one of them is the sucker. The question is, how much respect are you going to bring? Let's put a minute on the clock. Let's see this and let's stick the landing. Let's talk when time's up. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. So here's the real kicker. What is the disrespectful answer here? What is someone likely to pick on this because they didn't really appreciate this for being perhaps a tougher question than it seems? They just thought this is automatic money in the bank. Let me get my 760 just by signing up to take the test. I took a course, that gets me to a 760, right? This idiot keeps talking about 99 or bust. Here it is, where's my 760? It's like, no, here's your bust. Absolutely right, choice C, classic sucker move. And to me, you know, as I look at some of these answers, people picking these answers, is it a surprising list? I think not, unfortunately. And to me, again, I say that because I need some of you to have some more self-awareness. I think some of you lack that self-awareness. My hope is a week from now, if me trying to poke and prod doesn't do the trick, that somehow you'll find some inspiration that does. You cannot be picking choice C and thinking you're making a good move here. What have you done? This? And then said to yourself, like, okay, I get why he only gave us a minute. It took me 59 seconds to get here. Like, what? It took you probably like 5.9 seconds. What the hell are you doing with the other, I don't know, 54.1? You got to do something. You got to do something of value. And to me, that's where you say to yourself, like, maybe I overplayed my hand. Maybe this can't be done at all. Maybe I got me a yes answer. Maybe I can get me a no. Like, that's what you need to be thinking. And thus, when you see this and think to yourself, can I draw a circle where it's not centered? Sure. Just move up and down. Okay. See ya, choice C. E, final answer. And to be clear, if you are in choice E right now, and you were actually in choice E, C, that is, C for Charlie, or whatever way to do it on the camera, I'd have no problem with that. I'd have no problem whatsoever. But to me, the key is I at least respected the question enough where I got my ass out of C and went to choice E and stuck the landing. That's a win. All right, with that, I want to wrap up the world of According to Geo. Want to get into this last section, which is all about 3D shapes. Again, 3D shapes, I think, are just 2D shapes taken to the next level. Why is that? Because surface area is easy to calculate. It's just a bunch of 2D areas. You know how to do that. That's the whole first part of this lesson. Volume is the tough stuff, but even then, that's not that tough. It's just second dimension, or the area of a 2D shape, you know, times the third dimension. So the cube is just a square, side square, times the third dimension, S, side cubed. Cylinder, it's just a circle, pi r squared times the third dimension, the height. Rectangular box, It's a rectangle, length times width times the third dimension, the height. The idea is that if they give you a shape that isn't a 2D shape times a third dimension, such as maybe a sphere, they're supposed to give you that formula. But in my lawyerly paranoia, folks, I would just memorize that formula if I saw it, so I don't ever get burned by it down the road. With that then, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple questions here, starting off with this first one. I think this is a good question. It's a good question because, again, it gives you an opportunity to tap out with some really ridiculous answers. Don't do it. Even here, if you use the slightest bit of common sense, you should be able to get it down to 1 and 3 immediately. Like, you don't even need to do anything. You're just like, yeah, dude, I've packed a suitcase before. Okay. Then 2 of these answers are completely ridiculous. Like, to me, you know, at some point, like, there's disrespect that we sometimes show the test maker, or that we often show the test maker, or that we always show the test maker. This question right here with some of these answer choices, I think is a test maker just spitting in your face. Like, man, you got to be so damn dumb to pick these answers, I think, is what the test maker says with some of these choices. Like, I would take personal offense if I ever saw these types of answers, and I would then go sure as hell out of my way not to pick them. Let's put 2 on the clock. Let's stick the landing. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this. This is bad. This is bad. This makes me sad. What would you say is the absolute worst possible answer? And I would argue there are some that are easy contenders. I'm not sure what I would award as necessarily the worst. So here's what I'm going to say to you guys. I will say that Jonathan is actually right and Tom is right. So let's rewind back on this. I would say choice B is the most disrespectful answer out there. Like that I will say. Like this guy is the cockiest guy in the world. There's nothing I can do about it. Choice A would be the worst possible answer ever. Choice A is go back to day one and work on how to count, how to do math, how to do arithmetic. Like that's it. Like that's it, plain and simple. Like if you think choice B is a good answer because you're saying they just want to know what the biggest number is, and I know 12, 16, 20, 20 is bigger than 16, 16 is bigger than 12, so choice B is what it's going to get me to a 760, you're wrong. If, however, you look at choice A and you're like, I don't know, that looks pretty big to me, I'm deathly afraid for you, because what is root 2? You know it's 1.4, and if you don't, you gotta. Root 2, root 3, these come up frequently enough. That means it's about like 14-ish. And if it's about 14-ish, and you already know that you got one side that's 16 feet of your damn suitcase, or 20 feet long on the other side, like how the hell are you gonna pick a number that's smaller than that? Like I don't actually think that choice C is outrageous in fairness. If I'm going to get this wrong, I'm in C through E and I can live with it all day long. But this is bad, guys. Now, how do I actually finish this out? Well, first of all, get yourself a 3D diagram drawn so you can visualize. If you suck at drawing these things, sit on your couch when you're watching TV and nothing else to do, draw them. You don't want to struggle on test day. That's the worst part, when people draw and then they cross it out. Or on test day, remember, you can't really cross. Well, I guess you can kind of cross, but you can't erase. You're sitting there erasing all this ink on your hands, and that may irritate you. You want to get in the habit of being able to draw these things. Clearly, if I'm trying to jam something long in, I never do it on a side. It doesn't make sense. You got to go through the middle, from end to end, as far as you can get it. And when you look at it that way, what do you got here? Well, a line that starts to connect to other lines, at least. Hopefully you see that it connects straight up to that line. And it was great. I was private chatting with one of you right now, and then no, there is none. This is still family-friendly hour. We have not gone into Skinamax hour at this point. So the only thing that I would say to you is be able to connect the dots there. So if obviously I'm over on that side and I'm over here, then all I got to do is, like as I say, maybe I won't do it that way. Maybe I'll put it into black and white here. Like you can literally connect the dots. And thus, you say, all right, when, you know, and as I was saying, like when he was private chatting me here, I was like talking about even just how triangles are bailing your ass out all the damn time. And it's like, yeah, it's not a coincidence. Triangles are so damn useful, so damn important. So here what you start to have is like, okay, all I got to do is figure out what some of these other dimensions are. Now notice, you already know some of these dimensions. Now where you place these dimensions don't matter in theory. After all, your base, or let's say in this case these are triangles, so your length may be my width, you know, your height may be my length, and so things might just start to change, and that's okay. They still will get you to the same exact place. But question for you, when you were looking at this, did these numbers mean anything to you, or did they just seem like completely random numbers? Because you know there's no such thing as an accident on this test. Everything has some intelligent design or hidden beauty behind it. And it's on me to go look for them. Yeah, awesome. So you're spotting the 3, 4, 5 element. Absolutely have to. Because once you see the 3, 4, 5 in the mix, you can start to think to yourself like, well, why don't I even position these in a way that might be helpful? So ignore dimensions being drawn to scale or whatever. Like, why not just make this a 12, this a 16, and this a 20? Because if I do that, notice what starts to happen. Well, if I want to figure out what that dashed line is, this will be a 12, 16. That would force this to be a 20 because everything meets at a right angle in a rectangular solid. If that's a 20 and that's a 20, that's a right angle. That forces this to be a 20 rad too. Choice D, final answer. With how much math done? Because that's the way this rolls. Get those 10 out of 10 for the style from the Style Points judges. Now, am I ever going to do this question this way again? Hell no. Why? Because when I get into the you ought to know section, they have a nice little shortcut. That's called the longest dimension formula. And it basically says, hey, just take the square root of the length squared plus the width squared plus the height squared. This is sometimes referred to as the Super-Pythagorean theorem. Why? Because you're kind of doing a lot of Pythagorean theorem action here. You just may not realize it. Meaning you're doing the Pythagorean theorem once to get to that point. Then you're doing the Pythagorean theorem twice to get to this point. And so it is something to have memorized anytime you're in some sort of rectangular solid. Now, some of you may say, well, I didn't put my numbers there, and I did the math, and it's hard. It's like, no, it's not hard. This is just week 1 and week 2 arithmetic. Meaning, just to show it here, that would be like saying, hey, 12 squared, 144, 16 squared. I told you to memorize that as well as 25 squared, so this is already at 256. I never told you to memorize 20 squared, but 20 squared ain't hard. It's 2 squared, 4, add on a couple zeros. Now, these numbers nest together nicely. That's 100, 400, 800. So you're at root 800, 100 you could pull out. So you're at 10 root 8. 8, you know, is 2 root 2. And so you're there pretty quickly. Again, all these are things that I've tried to teach you to do before, which is 15 by 15 grid, throw the dart on the grid, know them by prime base exponents. So you're not dicking around with this stuff. It gives you all the time in the world to set up and read carefully, read slowly. But it's a zero-sum game. The only way you're going to be able to do that is if, on the execution side of things, you can knock it out. All right. There's this last question here. Take a look at it. It's an all right question. I think it's pretty easy. They basically give you everything you need. So it's like, hey, can you not fall on your face? There's not a whole lot of challenge there. I want to slowly start to wrap this up here. I like this slide. I think it's a good slide. I mean, it's kind of a stupid slide, but I like these types of slides. It says geometry is about leveraging your assets. It is. What assets do you got? Well, shit, you got a shitload of them in the damn skill builder. There's like formula after formula after formula you got to know down cold. Then, what do you do with them? You start to see how they're applicable in different ways. So, for example, here, like, okay, I learned area equals 1/2 base times height. But after this lesson, what did I really learn? A equals A. It's very important to realize that. Like, that's question number 1, you know, or whatever we did. Because what you're going to find is that if they ask them to you, like, hey, do you know what the area of a triangle is? Like, every idiot's going to know how to get that. So how are they going to weed people out to go to Harvard, could go to my mail order MBA program? They got to figure it out, and they got to do it in creative ways. So the best part is, as you do questions between now and test day, all you're doing on every single question is looking for the takeaway. Looking for the takeaway and articulating it somewhere so you don't miss it again. All right, we're done with Geo. What's in store for us next week? Monday's the last math lesson of the course. Last substantive lesson of the course. It's a stats, combinatorics, probability. It's a beefy skill builder. Come to class having crushed it. If you do, lessons, I think, relatively simple. If you don't, it's struggle city. Wednesday's lesson is the last lesson of the course. We're going to be talking about AWA and IR. It doesn't even matter as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't matter as the freaking admissions are concerned. Doesn't matter as far as the test maker is concerned. Like, no one cares about that stuff. I think the most important part on Wednesday's lesson is the last hour of the day where we talk about what to do between Wednesday and whenever test day may be. That's also the last day we're going to have an opportunity to dialogue in here. If you have any questions at all about the journey moving forward, that's the day to bring them and ask them. Well, that's all I got to say here, folks. Enjoy the rest of your guys' night. Much better job today, guys. I really appreciate that. I hope on Monday you come strong, prepared, ready to rock, and then we can slowly blow this whole thing out. Have a good night, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you guys all on Monday at the same time as usual. Have a good one.